Ralph, this ledger on the screen looks familiar to me.
Yeah, yeah, you ran it, Todd.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Okay. All right, well, I guess we'll go ahead and get started and let everybody else join in as they come along. But I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about what our goals are for these lunch and learns and what we hope to accomplish with them. Because we did send out some questions, see if anybody had any ideas of what they wanted us to cover, and because we want this to be something that y'all are interested in. So every time we have one, we're going to send out something for questions to entertain what we might talk about on the call. And we'll also mix those in with some of the things that we have that we think will be helpful to you. And the second thing we want to do is to give you some tools and some ideas to help you provide creative solutions for your clients. They're looking to us for answers on some things, and sometimes they think they know what they want, but until they talk to us, they really don't know. And I think that is going to be one of the things that we talk about. I think that's the third topic on the list today. But I do want to thank everybody for taking the time out of their day to join us. I hope that you find something useful. I always say that if I go to something like this and I come away with one idea, it was well worth my time. So with all that, we're going to get started. I've got 4 things. When we did the run through, I could only get to 3 of them. So we're probably going to stop at 3. But again, I think we got about 6 or 8 questions from people, and I'll be responding to the ones that we don't cover separately. But let's go ahead and get started. And the first thing that I want to cover is something that I'm sure that we've all seen or come across, because many of us have been in the business for a long time, and we wrote some of the UL contracts back before they had secondary guarantees. And now those UL contracts are coming to a point where they are going to either expire now or they will expire in the next few years. But the client is sitting there and they've paid more premiums than the value of the policy. Anybody seen that? I think it's pretty common occurrence. It comes across my desk regularly. So I'm going to kind of go through with one that I'm working on right now. It's not finished yet. We actually have a call at 2:00 for him to decide what he's going to do. But just to run through the scenario, he has a UL contract that he's paid $60,000 of premium into it. His policy values are currently $45,000. So he has a $15,000 loss in the contract. And if he cancels the contract outright, that $15,000 loss goes away. It's not tax deductible. It's just done. So he said he didn't need the life insurance, but he asked if there's something like single premium whole life. I said, sure. So what we looked at right on the screen now that you may be seeing is a quote for a single premium whole life contract. He's currently age 77. He's got $45,000 of value. This is actually a participating whole life contract where the death benefit is guaranteed at $56,000, but it pays dividends beginning at the end of year 1, and the death benefit would go up to $64,000 in 10 years, and 20 years it'd be up to $72,000. Does everybody see that? Cash value would be here where in 10 years it's up to $52,000. Pretty nondescript. The return on that to me did not look great. I was not real pleased with the way it looked. It's better than what he's got, because what he's got is going to go away in about 4 or 5 years. So this was option 1 for him. And I said, well, let's look at this and see what happens if he does it with an annuity. Now, one of the advantages to looking at an annuity is it doesn't have any mortality cost, but you can also 1035 exchange a life insurance policy into an annuity. You can't go the other way. You can't exchange an annuity for a life policy, but you can go from a life policy to an annuity. And here's the interesting thing that most people miss. Because typically when we think about 1035 exchanges, it is to avoid any taxable gain. The contracts may have a gain in place. Well, the rule is actually the basis transfers over, not the gain. So when you transfer something with a loss, the basis goes over at $60,000, not $45,000. So let's look at what that does and I used a nationwide New Heights contract. This is an indexed annuity. Over the last 12 years, the rate credited has actually been 8.67, but they illustrated it at 6.62, which is about 2% less than the actual last 12-year history. Here is his surrender value. Okay, this column, does everybody see my mouse? All right, so in 5 years, the surrender value is up to 71,000. The death benefit, I'm sorry, 63,000, and the death benefit is 69,000. Let's go back and look at that versus a single premium whole life, where the death benefit's 59,000 and the surrender value is 44,000. Now, you know I use Alabama math a lot, but it seems to me 69,000 is better than 59,000 and 63 is better than 44,000, right? And in 10 years, it's 96,000 of death benefit, surrender value of 94 versus 64,000. What's the difference? Well, unfortunately, with an annuity, the death benefit that's over the basis is taxable income. So you would think, since he put in 45,000, you might say that if he died in year 5, he got a $69,000 death benefit, that $24,000 would be taxable income. Well, that's not true in this case, because his basis is 60,000, not necessarily what the premium was. It was what the basis was in the life policy. So now only $9,000 is taxable to his beneficiaries. If you go out to 20 years, if he's fortunate enough to live to age 97 and his value is 194,000, he would have $134,000 taxable income. I think the family would probably be better with that than the single premium whole life that has $72,000 death benefit. Significantly more money in this particular indexed annuity. But that gives him the benefit of rolling over that loss that would have just gone away had he canceled or terminated the life insurance policy. Now, the good part for us is we will get paid about the same thing on the single premium whole life as versus this indexed annuity. Probably somewhere in the 5 to 7% range, depending on the carrier. So you're going to be about $2,250 of commission, just by remembering that that loss can carry forward just like a gain can. So let's take it another step further. Let's assume that he had a $50,000 loss in this contract, okay? And he only had $10,000 of value in it. There's really not a whole lot moving that to an annuity, but you might want to ask the client, do you have any annuities that you own? And guess what? They might say, oh yeah, I've got one that I got from 2002. Okay. How much, what's that one worth? Well, that was worth $220,000. How much did you put into it? 120. So you got a $100,000 gain in this other annuity, and you can exchange the life policy into an annuity. And now that loss helps offset the gain he's got in his existing annuity contract. Now, you can't exchange the life contract into an existing annuity. So you would have to rewrite the annuity. Gives you a reason to rewrite that annuity. And now you're getting 3 to 5, 7%, depending on the length of the surrender charge for writing that new annuity. Just remember, because that, to me, is a missing part of 1035 exchanges, that you also get to carry forward losses, not just gains. And remember, if you cancel a life insurance contract that has a loss in it, you don't get any tax benefit to it. Any questions on that? None? Chris, they have to raise their hand to get off unmute or not?
No, they should be able to unmute themselves, I
Okay.
think. Can you, I think we're good, yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, I hope that you can use that when you come across one of these UL contracts that are blowing up on your client and they want to have some additional solutions. Now, if they, they put in 60,000 of premium and it's worth 120, then it's just back to your normal everyday, let's roll it into a new life contract. All right, well, let's move on to the second thing. Is we got a question about how do you approach people with significant real estate holdings? How do you approach them about life insurance? And we all probably know somebody that has life real estate holdings. If not, for those of you that are in a P&C office, you certainly can ask some of the producers, the P&C producers, if they have any clients who have large real estate holdings, because they are usually fairly good prospects. They have significant net worth. It's not really liquid. They have huge balance sheets. They owe a lot of money. They got a lot of assets. Young ones probably are cash poor. You have to mature, it seems like, in the real estate world to have any positive cash flow of significance. But again, they have large real estate holdings. And sometimes we try to go and talk to them about buying enough coverage to cover their real estate portfolio in the event something happens. I'm a little concerned that sometimes when we approach them, we try them to sell them too much coverage. But when someone is in the real estate world, they have bought into that and they have gotten deductions over time for depreciation. Now, when they sell that property, they have to recoup all those depreciation expenses as income in the year they sell it, unless they do something like a 1031 exchange, which is the real estate version of 1035 exchanges. Now, so when they do that, they avoid any current taxation on those accumulated depreciation expenses. So they are in there, but when they die, all of that, it gets a stepped up basis in the hands of their heirs. So when someone has a lot of real estate holdings, they probably realize they have to either hold that piece of property until they pass away, or they're going to exchange it for other real estate. Now, I'm not going to talk about the young real estate investors, but because again, they're going to be cash poor and asset rich. I'm going to talk more about the mature real estate investor who's 55, 60 or older. Now they are starting to see the benefits of having owned that real estate. They all exhibit a lot of the same characteristics. They're risk takers. You probably owe a significant amount of money, have significant assets, and they're probably male. This is not an asset class that women bought in the 80s and 90s. Okay, now, when the male is buying the asset, the spouse may or may not be involved in the real estate ventures. We all hear horror stories from landlords about the toilets that get stopped up at 2 o'clock in the morning that they've got to go fix. Mama doesn't want any part of that. So how are we going to liquidate that real estate when the time comes? And again, Papa's holding that until death because of the step up in basis. That step up in basis goes over to Mama when he passes. Over the last few years, and I don't know if any of you own real estate, but there are companies all the time out there calling, trying to buy real estate. You know, we buy ugly houses. All of those now are options for a person to liquidate the real estate fairly quickly. But they're going to come at about a 10 to 15% reduction off of fair market value, somewhere in that neighborhood. Plus, you're also under the risk of market fluctuations. For any of those that were around in 07, 08, 09, when real estate went down 20, 30%, I don't think, I hope we don't see that in 2023, but I think we will see some pressure, downward pressure on real estate prices in 2023, maybe to the tune of 5 to 10%. So now someone's going to be at the risk of about a 20 to 25% reduction in the value of their property if they were unfortunate and passed away. So when you're talking to the real estate people, you need to talk to them about insuring about 20 to 25% of their portfolio that might go down in the event of their passing, not the whole thing. Makes it much more palatable for them to think about doing that. Well, you say, Ralph, I don't know any real estate people. Well, let me show you. I'm going to share you my screen and show you how easy it is to find somebody that has real estate holdings. I did this in about 2 minutes this morning. So you go to a homes for rent page, and I just did Pelham, Alabama, which is where I am, and you come up with 521 Walker Road. Okay. Now you can go to the tax assessor in the county, which is Shelby County, Alabama. I put in 521 Walker Street and I hit search, and I find out the owner of that real property is Azima Real Estate LLC. Okay. So now let's look for them under name, and I'm going to put in Azima and hit search, and let's hope that the response is quicker than it was this morning. It was. Look, they now have 8 properties, all in the value of $150,000 or so. So they got about $1.2 million just in Shelby County, Alabama. And you say, okay, that's fine. How do I find Azima Real Estate LLC? Well, I'm glad you asked. So you go to the Secretary of State website and you do a search, very easy, and it says, put in Azima, and look what comes up. You've got the registered agent name, and I'm going to defer on pronouncing that. I don't want to do an injustice to them. But this is probably the attorney. I know that address. That's a high rise, so Suite 1400 is probably some high-priced attorney. And the agent mailing address is Greystone Way, and it is now, it's changed from Deer Valley to Greystone Way. I know both of those addresses. That's a home of about, area of homes of about 300,000. The Greystone Way is homes of about 800,000. So I think that this family is doing fairly well. And that's how easy it is to find a real estate investor. Took me about 3 minutes this morning to find that person. Okay. So now how do you get them to do something? And here's how I would approach them. This is how I've approached real estate people in the past. And I'm just going to say, Todd, let me talk to you. I got a piece of property I want to sell you. It's $1 million. What I want you to do is pay me 2% of that number for 20 years. Okay. Now, if you die in the 20 years, I'm going to give that property to your beneficiaries. No loan, no nothing. You get the property. If you don't pass away in the first 20 years, let's say you go to 20, you stop paying me after 20. And then if you pass away in 25, I'm still going to give you that $1 million piece of property with no loan, no lien, nothing. Does that sound like a pretty good idea? You're going to pay 2% of the value for 20 years or 40% of the value of the property. Would you do that deal? I can't see everybody, but raise your hand if that sounds like a good deal. Okay. I think it's a good deal. Well, guess what that is? If you look at this, here's a policy on a 60-year-old for $1 million, paying $20,000 a year for 20 years, which is 2% of the $1 million. The cash value in 20 years is 530. The death benefit's $1 million. I haven't said anything about life insurance. I've been talking to him about property. He's gonna pay 40 cents on the dollar for $1 million piece of property. Now, so you think that's a good deal? What about, Todd, if I say, you know what? What instead of doing 2%, you give me 3% for that property. And at the end, when you either pass away down the road, I'm not only gonna give you the $1 million piece of property, I'm gonna give you your $600,000 back. You like that idea? That's another illustration with a death benefit that's equal to $1 million plus the premiums paid. So in 10 years, they paid $300,000. The death benefit's $1.3 million. 20 years, they paid $600,000. The death benefit's $1.6 million, and the cash value is $818,000. Now, that sounds like a pretty good deal. So sometimes real estate people talk about ROI, or return on investment. Everybody heard that name? On this deal at $30,000 a premium, the ROI on the death benefit is 8.53% over 20 years. To me, that is a number that would get a real estate investor's attention. It helps him diversify out of real estate. And I use 2 and 3%. If you have a younger person, you might not, you have to use 2 and 3%. If you have an older person, it might be as much as 4%. But it's you frame it in some percentage of the death benefit. You don't say $40,000 premium. You don't say $30,000 premium. You say 3% of the property value. It is a piece of property, right? It's just not real property. So that's the way you can get some real estate investors to move. I will tell you one other story that I had. That this was back when estate tax limits were much lower. I had a couple. They owned about 23 properties, and they had an estate tax liability. I think it was a little over $1 million, 1.2 million, something like that. And they owned 23 or 27 properties. I can't remember now. I got them into the office. They weren't going to buy the survivorship policy I was recommending to them. Went out, took pictures of all the properties, put a value on it, wrote it on a piece of paper. And I stuck these pictures all over the walls of the conference room when they came in. And I said, Mr. Jones, Ms. Jones, we've determined your estate liability is about 1.2 million. What I want to do is, in the event of your passing, you don't have enough cash. You're going to have to liquidate some of these properties to pay. So which one do you want to take first? So they said, okay, 123 Jones Street. I pulled that down, subtracted it. It says, now we got $1 million liability. And the first 2 or 3 were pretty easy. By the 4th or 5th one, the wife finally says, okay, we'll buy the insurance. Because they had some sort of affinity for every one of those properties. And the more they had to sell, the harder it got for them to choose. That was a little different story. Now, good luck if you find someone who has a $25 million estate. I'll be more than happy to come out and do a joint call with you if you're going to do somebody who has a $30 million estate. But that is a way to get real estate. It's not only the way to find them, it's the way to talk to them and get them to think of life insurance as something other than life insurance. They think about what property is. Okay, so that's my second one. You want to have any questions there? Anybody? Okay. Now, here's the third one that I want to come up with, and this is, people have been around me for a while. This is kind of one of my pet peeves, as I am not a big fan of 30-year term insurance. I know that everybody sells it. It's what the clients call in, what they want, but I'm going to show you some of the real, to me, issues with somebody buying a 30-year term policy. Okay. So I looked this morning, I'm gonna pull this up. I looked at a 45-year-old male, preferred, super preferred, non-smoker for $1 million of coverage. Okay. And the premium for 20-year term, the cheapest one was $1,004. John Hancock's Vitality product was out there, but as many of you are aware, that's not a real true 20 or 30-year term unless they do all the vitality issues. So I just marked them off. I can't remember which company it was, Protective or Banner, I don't remember which. And the 30-year term was 1718. So can we all agree that this client would pay more for the 30-year term insurance for the first 20 years of the contract? There's no savings for this insured until year 21 at the earliest. And that's an out-of-pocket savings. So what I did here is I just accumulated the premium, $1,004 for 20 years is $20,000. The 30-year premium is $34,000. Now, I also go back and I think about lapse rates. If 5% of the policies lapse each and every year for 20 years, do you know how many of those policies are left after 20 years? I think it's like 25 to 30%. If 10% of them lapse, which is more along the lines of what companies price in, 12% of the policies are left after 20 years. Now, is your client going to be one of the lucky ones, one of the 12% that still has that policy in year 21? I think it's unlikely. Now, instead, they've already committed to a $1,700 premium. Why not sell them $1.7 million of 20-year term? And say, Todd, you committed to the $1,700 premium. Now, at the end of 20, you won't have any change in money out of your pocket for 20 years. But if something were to happen to 20 years, your family would have made, you would have made a $700,000 mistake for your family. That's a big number. That could be the same whether it's a $500,000 policy or $750 or whatever. The ratio is going to be the same. They're going to make a huge mistake by doing that. Now, let's see what happens if they would then at year 21, they were to buy a 10-year policy. The cheapest premium on a 10-year policy was $41.50. That would have been for a 65-year-old for 10 years. You're still paying $17.18 on the 30-year. After it would take year through 26 years of premium before their out-of-pocket expenses would have been the same. I said it'd been at least 21 years before they saw any savings. It's really 27 years before there's any savings by buying a 30-year term on this 45-year-old. Now, but we don't want to mess up the sale. Take the application for the 30-year term. And then when it comes around to deliver the policy, say, you know, I've been thinking about this, Todd. I got a better idea for you. Let me explain it to you. And you can order out that other policy. Because here's the thing about this guaranteed level premium term insurance. It is guaranteed not to go up in premium or go down in death benefit, right? But we never talk about the converse. It's not going to go down in premium either. If mortality rates get better, interest rates rise, the premium's not going down. Many of these companies out there won't even let you change the death benefit. So if you don't need $1 million of coverage when you're 65 years old, guess what? You don't have any choice. You either keep the policy or let it lapse. So are you really going to see those savings on a 30-year term? I'd rather sell them 20-year term and sell them 70% more. The younger you are, it's even more. I did a 35-year-old male. It was $384 for $782, almost twice as much coverage for a 20-year term on a 35-year-old. The cumulative premium, if you requalify at 55, it's the same thing at 20 after 30 years. Okay, I'm just saying that's why I'm not a fan of 30-year term. But let's go back to the 45-year. I got one more thing to show you. I said you could buy 700,000 more of coverage, right? If you went with 20-year term instead of 30-year term. What if the client says, you know what? I don't need the $1.7 million. It's okay. Well, let's still buy the 20-year term at $1,000. And let's take that $700 difference that you've already committed to and put it into an IUL for a minimum death benefit and see what that looks like. Well, let's go back and look at this. And I chose North American Company for Life and Health on this one. And actually the minimum death benefit was about $58,000. So now he's going to pay $1,000 for the 20-year term, $700 for the IUL. He's paying the same thing as a 30-year term. This has a guarantee return of premium feature on the IUL policy for $14,000 in year 20. So if he'd have bought the 30-year term and he needs to change or cancel in the year 21, what does he get back from that 30-year term? Zero. This way, he's guaranteed $14,000 back for the same premium. This is almost a return of premium. Doesn't return all of his premium, but it's close. It's, to me, a better idea than just a straight 30-year term. You know, I guess A.L. Williams was the one that really made buy term and invest the difference as a part of culture, even though we probably don't like A.L. Williams. He had some strange ways to sell things. But anyway, that's where this proliferation of death benefits really started, was when A.L. Williams came along, they started selling these larger policies. And today we sell larger policies with term insurance. I'm just saying, I don't think you need to buy the 30-year term. Buy 20 and invest the difference. And I think your client will be better off over that period of term, because again, when they get out to be 55, 60, 65, do they need $1 million worth of death benefit? Because I had a client one time that told me, I think it was 72 or 3. He said, Ralph, if my kids are worried about my death benefit when I die, I've done a pretty poor job of raising them. So do you need $1 million worth of death benefit at age 70? Again, I can't answer the questions. Your clients can answer the questions. I could just help you figure out how to ask them.
Ralph, Howard had a question. Did you say 12% of 30-year term policies are still in force after 20 years? And where did that number come from?
I said, if 10% of the policies lapse every year, only 12% are in force at the end of 20 years.
Yeah.
You would just take 0.9, which is the persistency, to the 20th power, which is 0.12 something. I could do that real quick. Let's see. Tell you exactly what it is. 12.15% are in force after 20 years if 10% lapse. If only 5% lapse, it's 35.8% are in force. Again, the lapse rate for pricing is usually about 10%. Now, again, I don't know, your client might be one of the 12% or the 20% that keeps it for 30 years. But, chances are against them. And again, why not buy more if something happens to them in the 20-year period during their working career? Because we all know that people are underinsured. They still may buy $1 million policy, but they probably need 2. Now, it's changed a little bit since interest rates are on the rise. But, if you bought $1 million policy and wanted to live off the interest, when they were 3% and 4% interest rate, maybe that was only $30,000 or $40,000 a year. Now, $1 million policy probably generate 70 or 80. It's a little different in the last 3 months, but 6 months, whatever long as interest rates have been on the rise. But that $1 million policy is, what the beneficiary is going to get is very interest sensitive. So those are my 3 ideas. I had a 4th one. I don't think I want to get into it because it really is talking about executive benefits and how to talk and design something to retain key employees. And I really think that could encompass a whole entire session and talk altogether. So I'm going to put that on the back burner. I'm going to stop with those 3 ideas. I hope one of those is something that you could possibly take and put into your practice. Again, I'll go over them quickly with the old UL contracts that are expiring or running out of steam, what to do with those, how to address those issues. The second one, I talked about finding real estate prospects, how to address them with the piece of property idea rather than selling them life insurance, because they understand return, they understand risk. And then the last one is the 20-year term versus 30-year term. Now, those are my 3 for today. Again, we'll have another one of these. We probably will take off for December with Christmas, but probably do it in January sometime in about 6 or 7 weeks. So if there are other topics that you want to talk about, or you want me to come up with ideas, because I have many ideas of how to approach clients and prospects, what to say. A lot of it is how you position yourself. I'm very happy to talk about that, either if you want to call me or send me an email. Like I said, I've got a list here of about 6 or 8 questions. I will probably respond to each of those separately. But that's kind of where we are with today's session, unless somebody has some questions that they wanted to ask. Anybody?
Ralph, Howard had a question. Are you familiar with the Cotton system?
I have heard Wayne Cotton. He's been around for 30 or 40 years. I have not heard his name in probably 15 years. So no, I am not familiar with what he's doing. I know he is a prospecting marketing type system, and that's about all I know. I've seen him speak at some insurance company meeting somewhere along the line.
Yeah, that's about as familiar as I am. I've heard about the system, and it's used in financial services by some advisors, and it's been around a long time, but I don't know anything in depth about it. So,
yeah, it's just one of those things. If he's been around that long, you have to think he's been successful.
yeah.
I know he's a Canadian guy.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, he's been around, and I think that in some circles he probably has a pretty good following. I just don't ever run across him anymore.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else? Let's see. I'll answer. There's a question about the best annuities, and that kind of depends on whether you're talking about indexed or MYGAs, and who has the best annuity product fluctuates a lot quicker.
Yeah.
The product development span for annuities is much shorter than life products. So life products, you kind of know who the competitive carriers are. Annuities are always, there's some that are always going to be fairly competitive, but who's the top one, right? It always seems to change. Again, a lot of the other questions are about IULs and tax deferral of cash value, which I think is really about golden handcuffs, and that comes into play. So it's its own session. Oh, and there's something, also somebody asked about LTCI riders or LTC riders on life products. And I'll address that directly with them. Okay,
All right.
any more questions? I hope that y'all found that beneficial. Again, like I said, I hope there's one topic you can take out of that. And, you know, on the 20 versus 30-year term, don't let that mess up your sale. Take the application, get the policy underwritten, and then present it to them.
Yeah.
All right, you don't want to chase off your sale. All right. I hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you, Ralph.
All right, we'll see you later.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Yeah, bye-bye.